Hey little Philo! A couple of videos ago I mentioned that I would like to do a couple of reviews, and the day has finally arrived. Today I would like to talk to you about the oldest book which I have in my possession, namely this one right here. This is a Greek New Testament which was published in 1736 by a German theologian called Adam Rechenberg. I would like to talk to you about this book a little bit. It has lots of interesting features, and it is also, as I said, the oldest book I have in my possession, and in a decent condition, I would like to argue, considering its age. I got this book for actually just about 50 euros off an online bookseller which sells, antique books, because I just thought it was interesting to have such an old book in your possession. So let us go and look at this book in a bit more detail. There's lots of very interesting notes in here. There's also one thing that I found quite interesting, a map kind of wedged into one of the pages. Don't worry if you can't really make out anything just yet. We will be taking a closer look at all the features of the book in just a second. But I want to show you the map a bit more because it is a very interesting thing. It's just kind of, as I said, it's just wedged into the page here. It's very flimsy, so whenever I touch it, whenever I open it, it feels like I'm about to break it. But as you can tell, there is a rather decently sized map that folds out of the book of, as it says here, Palestine or the Holy Land, or in German, as it says down here, Palästina oder das gelobte Land. It's just a map of, Palestine, Israel, and with lots of, towns marked on here. So let us now take a little bit of a closer look at the features of the book, and we shall be starting, of course, with the front page. So, as I just said, let us now take a closer look at the front page. And the first thing I think that is quite immediately visible once you open the book is this rather nice illustration here, directly on the left. At the very top it says Rechenberg, which is the ancient Greek word for the New Testament, but the scene itself actually depicts a scene from the New Testament, namely from John. I know this, firstly because I know the scene, but secondly because it actually gives you the source. It says John 6 down here at the bottom. But not only that, it has what you could equate to as speech bubbles. Well, at least one, and the other ones aren't really bubbles. This is more of a speech sword. I'm not sure how you would, call this, but this speech bubble says, you don't also want to leave, do you? Basically. And you can see up here, there's also a quote, which is difficult to read actually, because it's kind of not sure who thought this was a good idea, but it's black text on a black background. But as I said, this scene depicts a scene from John. And at the bottom again, a quote which says, Kyrie, prostina apolusometha, tremata zoes ionio echis. And this is basically a short scene from John, just depicted as an image. Now that we've looked at the left side of the front page, which contained this really nice illustration, let us now go further and look at the right side. The right side contains the actual title of the book, once again, Rechenberg, and below it you can see the title in Latin, Novum Jesu Christi Testamentum, which means the New Testament of Jesus Christ. Below this you can also see Ad formam editionis Leusteni, and Leusteni is the genitive form of the name Leusten, I believe. If this is incorrect, please tell me in the comments. I am unfortunately not proficient in Latin whatsoever. But from my research, I have found out that Leusten was actually a colleague of Rechenberg's, who actually was responsible for the Greek text in this book. So if it had not been for Leusten, the Dutch theologian, this edition would probably not have been published. Unfortunately, it was a bit difficult finding information about him, but if you're interested, there is, I believe, a Wikipedia article about him, and you can find that in the description. Another thing which you can find on the right side, further down at the bottom, is actually just a text telling you that it contains a geographical map. Nec non cartis geographicis diligenter expressum. So it just tells you that there's a geographical map, or just a map, hidden inside this book. And that's the same map that I already mentioned in the very beginning of this video, and we'll be taking a closer look at that in just a couple of minutes. It also tells you that this is the 4th edition. So this is not the 1st edition. The 1st edition was published a couple of years earlier. Unfortunately, I am not entirely certain when the 1st edition was published. However, the 4th edition is quite clearly marked down here, was published, as already mentioned, in 1736. It also tells you the town, or rather city, in which it was published, namely Leipzig, which in Latin is, and once again I'm not entirely sure how this is pronounced, I am not very proficient in Latin, but I believe it is Lipsiae, which is the genitive, I believe, of Leipzig in Latin. And that's basically all you can find on the right side. There's a couple of other information on here, but I don't really think it is really interesting enough to go into in further detail. Now that we've taken a closer look at the front page of the book, let us now delve deeper into the book. And the first thing we find after delving deeper into the book is the preface. Unfortunately, the preface has been written in Latin, and I'm not proficient, as I already said, in Latin whatsoever. And therefore I am unable to tell you what this says. However, should you be able to speak Latin and should you wish to read this, send me a message, I'll send you a couple of photos. After the preface, we find Prefatio Nova, which I am guessing probably means new preface, which as well has been written in Latin, and therefore I cannot read it. So we're going to be skipping the prefaces. I believe there are a couple of others. As I said earlier, if you'd like to read them, send me a message, I'll send a couple of photos. Unfortunately, personally, I cannot tell you anything about the prefaces, so I'm going to be skipping them, and we're going to go directly into the most interesting part of the book, I believe, the map. The map, as already mentioned, is just glued onto a page. It's not even a page just for the map or a page which explains the map. It is literally just a page right after the preface into which it was glued. Why exactly this was done, I'm still not entirely certain. In my opinion, it would have made much more sense to just put it at the very beginning or at the very end of the book, but for some reason they decided to just wedge it into the page just after the preface. And that, however, does not negate its interesting features. It's just a map, but it's still quite interesting. As I said, you have to be really careful when opening this up because it is quite delicate. It's made out of very, very thin paper, even thinner than the pages themselves, and it folds out of the book like this. Once you have folded out the map, you can immediately tell what this is, because it says at the very bottom, Palestine or the Promised Land. At the very top left, it has a nice compass, so you know that north is in fact at the very top. And you can see here a map, and it has lots of regions, lots of towns scribbled into it, mountain ranges, buildings, vegetation. It's quite interesting how much detail there is in this map. Now, I haven't personally counted how many towns, cities, mountain ranges and other things have actually been given a name or been labelled here, but I would guess that it's definitely well over 100. There are many things here, and this is very helpful actually. So for example, when you're reading the Gospel of John or any other Gospel or anything really, and they mention that they're in town X and they're going to town Y, and you're just really interested in finding out, well, where is this in ancient Judea? You can just do that. You can open this page and you can see, okay, so Bethlehem is here, Jerusalem is here, Cana is here, and so forth. So that you can kind of track their journey, which I find is very helpful and definitely interesting to see where they were, all the towns they visited. So it's a very interesting feature of this Bible. Now that we have taken a look at the most interesting features of the book, let us now take a rather brief look into the Bible itself. It is, as I have already mentioned, just the Greek New Testament. So it includes just the Greek New Testament, the Apocalypse of John, the Gospels, Acts, and everything else. So there's nothing really special about that. However, because this is such an old book, there are some interesting notes and scribbles everywhere. The majority of the notes and scribbles can actually be found at the end and the very beginning of the book. So let us now take a quick look at that. We shall open the front, the page before the front page, and you can see notes. Now, lots of these are actually almost indistinguishable. It looks like somebody wrote down some numbers. There are some numbers which were actually written in here by the seller of the book with a pencil, which is kind of weird that they would do that, but there's a year in here, there's a price in euros, so this is definitely quite new. This has to be from at least 2002-ish. So the notes in here, this pencil thing is quite new. I'm not sure if I'll be able to put a close-up of this on the screen because it is quite faint, although in person it is definitely quite visible. This page also contains what looks like passages from both the Old and New Testament. I can, for example, see Hiob here, Hiob and Römer, which is Romans, the book of the New Testament. But other than that, most of the things in here are basically unintelligible. However, if you go one page further, there are some more interesting notes. For example, here you can see somebody practicing the names of ancient Greek letters. So we have alpha, something that looks like iota, which is a bit weird, ypsilon, omicron, chi, rho, sigma, and psi. So the names of the Greek letters. Somebody just wrote them down for some reason, but it's still quite interesting. You can see a name at the top here, though I am not really able to tell you what that name says. I thought it was Johannes, but upon closer inspection, I do not believe it actually is. And when you go further to the right side, you can see more names. Christophernis Adamus Halbmeier. Christopher Adam Halbmeier. Not entirely certain who that is, but I'm guessing since his name is scribbled in here, it is probably one of the previous owners of the book. And considering the way it was written, I'm guessing it is probably from the 17th century or 18th century. Another thing which I found interesting on this page is at the bottom is Christoph Adam Halbmeier, written again, but this time in Greek letters. So Christopher, as his name would be in English, Christopher, decided to write his name not only in Latin characters, but also in Greek characters, which is quite interesting that he would do that. So if we now go to the back of the book, we can see more scribbles and more notes, although these are definitely much less intelligible. I can't really make out anything. Two of those look like somebody was just bored and decided to kind of squiggle around in the book, not knowing what to do. Something looks a bit like notes, but the handwriting is quite oldish, so I'm not really able to read this either. And yeah, that is actually about it. Now, as I said earlier, this is the oldest book that I own. It is in decent condition, but it is not really something that you read the Bible with. I just have it around, show it to friends. I keep it in here in my room. But it is still very interesting, in my opinion, having such an old book, being able to look at it. And I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed this little review of this rather old book. And I hope to see you next time when I'll be reviewing a couple of other books as well. Probably some more older books, because I think these reviews of older books are quite interesting. But I will also be recording a couple of reviews of newer books meant for learning Greek. So I hope you look forward to that, and I'll definitely see you next time when we're going to be reviewing another book. See you then.